experience in different crops across different geographies is different, and obviously there is a lot of difference which happens between government acreage estimations and ours. And there are some inbuilt issues in the government estimations. For example, we were monitoring soybean acreage last year. See, what happens, government always add to the figures, they never reduce the numbers. For example, if there is a shower, there is a 4-inch rain, the crop is sown, it's fine. But if after that, if there is a 8 days or 10 days, temperature soars to 40 degrees, obviously that how much plantation went wrong, I mean, how much germination failed. So they never reverse the figures. Once the figure is there, so that is one anomaly which always is there. Then how the acreage estimations, there is no scientific basis, to be very frank, and estimating for the crop and even the production figures. Huge difference, huge difference. Even if you say in, I don't know about maize, anyone knows in Bihar, with Monsanto, Pioneer, 80-90% of the areas in the hybrid, average productivity is between 7 to 8 tons per hectare. Government is stuck up till now around 4 to 5. It has a total tradable surplus of 3 lakh tons. That is a tradable surplus from Bihar, as a whole trade knows. You guys know, people go into trading. Government still is almost at 2 lakh tons. So there is a huge difference in the production, huge difference in the productivity, and acreages. So everything is wrong. So once it add up, so that's why we are the trading. I mean, those estimates are very correct.
Thank you. We have one more.
Yeah, I had a small question for Kai. You gave a lot of good insight about the initiatives of ICA with other organizations, especially like BCI, and BCI is now not partnering or not allowing to partner mills with unfulfilled ICA awards. So can we expect that to trickle down to other associations in other countries, like in India with CEI doing the same, or ICA helping out or partnering with CEI in those terms that they follow the same procedures or initiatives for mills with unfulfilled awards for BCI?
I think the question is, because BCI being a member, an affiliated association, they're reducing the number of people coming off the default list. Can we expect other associations to do the same? Is that what?
Yeah. I mean, what would be your take in pushing this apart from ICA, because we have CI where there are awards for defaulting mills, but those are never really published or published on the ICA side. So, you know, what is your idea on going forward on that? I mean, how would you propose that an association like CI in India or other countries where they have domestic associations adopt it as well?
I'll try and answer that one. I'm sorry, the acoustics are not very good. Okay, first of all, the reason why BCI is such an important partner is because they are policing the people that can trade BCI cotton. That in itself, because it's being demanded by the retailers, means that those mills in particular that are on the default list that want to deal with retailers with BCI cotton, they've got a choice. They have to they continue as they are, not trading BCI cotton, or they want to trade BCI cotton, they have to come off. If you look at other associations, they've got to have that sort of stick in order to make it effective. If you look at an association like CAI, for example, it polices its members, it's agreed to police its members by not having defaulters in its association. That stick may not be strong enough, it may need something else. I think you mentioned about the CAI awards. Is that part of the question?
You want to speak first? What should CAI present?
You want me to persuade CAI to have a big stick? I'll do my
Give Darren a big stick.
Yeah, so it's really, for the ICA moving forward, it's got to persuade those associations to act, of course, but looking at other bodies that perhaps have the big stick and can regulate the trade to help us as well. That's what we're looking at. We're looking for those type of organisations, particularly membership-based organisations, where we can have that influence.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, we're going to have to go to lunch, I think. I'd just like everyone to join me in thanking all the speakers. I think it was a very quality session. So thank you, everyone. Mr. Gentlemen, we'll be available now for lunch. Sorry that we couldn't answer all the questions, so please approach them individually. Thank you.
To 2013. He worked at the United States Department of Agriculture for 5 years in the 1980s, analyzing the US cotton industries and editing a magazine devoted to the cross-section of agricultural issues. He joined the ICAC in 1987 as a statistician and was promoted to executive director in 1999. He has a PhD in agricultural and resource economics from Oregon State University in the United States. Can we have a huge round of applause for Dr. Terry Townsend, please?
Thank you very much. Colin. Oh, okay. One more panel member. And thank you for coming. I'm sure some other people will finish lunch and hear the speakers operating. I'm sure more people will come in. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I worked for 27 years in a governmental organization that's dedicated to free trade and expanding trade opportunities within the common sector. So this topic is very important. We'll call it. We have two government officials. Two government officials and three from the private sector will be talking about this topic: efficiencies of free markets, reducing incentives for cotton in order to save cotton. I'm going to introduce the speakers one at a time, all at once, and I'm going to let each one of them answer a question and speak for a minute. The session open for questions. So I'm going to start by introducing the two government officials, beginning with Mr. Sindelar from the United States and then Mr. Mishra from India. Starting with them, because ultimately these are government decisions to be made. I'm starting with the United States because the U.S. cotton industry has been a focus of discussions in the WTO for a decade. Both the Africans, called the C4, buttressed by Brazil, went against the United States, put pressure on the U.S. to reduce its cotton subsidies, and in WTO parlance it was called treating cotton ambitiously and specifically. So, Scott, yes. The United States passed a farm bill, it's called, in 2014. The farm bill includes provisions for cotton, and I'd like you to give me this microphone, and I'd like you to describe the cotton provisions of the 2014 farm bill. And Scott had a full presentation, but I've forced him to trim down to just 4 slides in the interest of focus and time. So you put Scott's presentation up, and he'll talk about those 4 slides. Again, there's a farm bill, includes provisions for cotton, and what does it mean?
Thank you, Terry, and good afternoon to everyone. It's been a real pleasure for me to be here, and thank you to the Cotton Association of India and Niran for all the arrangements that were made for me to participate. I'm grateful as well to my colleagues in the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington to help prepare me for participating here, since I am not really an expert on cotton. In my position as Minister Counselor at the Embassy, we cover all agricultural issues and a number of commodities, but I think cotton is, a very critical issue, certainly for India as well as for the United States. So, the question that Terry posed has to do with the U.S. Farm Bill. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the Farm Bill is the primary agricultural and food policy tool of the U.S. government. It is a comprehensive piece of legislation that is revised and renewed every 5 years. As Terry mentioned, the current Farm Bill was signed into law on February 7th, 2014. It specifically and ambitiously, to use the language from the WTO, addressed cotton so that U.S. cotton farmers are no longer eligible for the kind of direct price protection available to other commodities like wheat, corn, and soybeans. By making major revisions to cotton programs, the 2014 Farm Bill brought U.S. cotton policy into complete compliance with the WTO ruling in the Brazil cotton case. The 2014 bill eliminated the direct countercyclical payment programs under the previous Farm Bill. Direct payments to cotton farmers had averaged some $500 million per year. Now, it's important to point out that some support still exists for U.S. cotton in the form of marketing assistance loans and an additional crop insurance program called the Stacked Income Protection for Upland Cotton, or as you see here in the slide, STACS. Can we switch to the next slide, please? And so the new Farm Bill does have direct impact on U.S. cotton farmers. Eliminating those direct payment programs, it reduces the guaranteed minimum price support level for U.S. farmers. It had been about 72 cents a pound under the earlier bills, and now limits it to an equivalent price as provided by the marketing assistance loan. And so this marketing assistance loan price is set each year and will range between 45 and 52 cents per pound depending on the market conditions. So you see that U.S. support for cotton is considerably less than it had been in the past. One more slide here. And so the Cotton Stacks program is an additional insurance program that replaces that direct subsidy that farmers have received with a subsidized insurance program. There's no support for price declines between seasons. It really is an intra-seasonal risk mitigation program. And in 2015, which probably was the first year STACS was available to farmers, is that right? Participation, was less than 1/3 of cotton acreage in the United States. So I guess the main point is the 2014 Farm Bill went directly to the cotton programs and eliminated those that the WTO had found to be a violation of the agreements, and brings the U.S. cotton programs into compliance with the WTO. And U.S. farmers will have, U.S. cotton farmers will have much less support under the existing program, and will be responding more directly to market conditions.
Thank you, Scott. You should have pointed out, Scott is a Foreign Service officer. He's not a political appointee. So, Scott, this question, I'm not asking you to defend the administration position. Now, we're here talking about subsidies. As you pointed out, subsidies have been reduced. Farmers still get subsidies. Why should farmers get any subsidy at all? What's the point?
Well, I think every country in the world, with maybe one or two exceptions, provides some support to agriculture, some support to farmers. As WTO has ruled, or as countries negotiate support programs with within the WTO, so long as support does not distort markets or distort trade particularly. There are legitimate reasons to support farmers. And I think partly it's to ensure that there's some income protection. Agriculture, all commodities are very risky. Weather conditions, market conditions, lots of factors influence the viability of farmer incomes and farmer revenues. And so I think there is some legitimacy to provide some level of support for farmers. And also, you can't ignore that in the United States, as in, I think, most countries with large agricultural economies, there's political pressure brought about by farm interests to maintain some level of support for farmers and for production.
So the U.S. provides support because other countries do, because farming is inherently risky and there's political pressure. Thank you. We'll come back to that. Now, I'd like to introduce a good friend, Mr. B.K. Mishra. Mr. Mishra became the chairman, come managing director of the Cotton Corporation of India in 2010. And I believe we met at the country meeting in Lubbock, Texas, a year. Very much appreciate interaction with Mr. Mishra over the years. He is honest and transparent, and certainly is those are certainly strong and important characteristics in government official. So, Mr. Mishra, India operates a minimum support price scheme, and everybody here knows what that is, so we don't need to explain what that is. So I have two questions for you. First of all, the MSPs are paid to farmers when prices are low. By definition, low prices mean we have an abundance or surplus. And MSPs keep farmers producing cotton at a time when we already have surplus. So let's start with that. Why does the government of India support prices at a time when there's a surplus, markets telling farmers to produce less?
The concept of MSP in India is basically based on to ensure that farmers are getting the cost of their produce, so that they could not divert on other commodities, other crop next season. That is also to ensure, because India is comparatively a self-reliant in terms of consumption. We more than 80% of our cotton we consume domestically, to ensure that the availability of cotton to our spinning mills, as well as to keep farmers growing cotton uninterruptedly in the next seasons. This is the spirit of government of India. And like cotton, India is doing MSP operations for few other commodities, and cotton is one of them as a natural fiber. Though jute is also there, but jute is quantum of jute and other things are negligible. So the purpose is to ensure that farmers will grow cotton season after season, and there will not be any situation that India as well as the rest of the world would be devoid of cotton. That is it.
Mr. Bishop, in other countries, in Latin America, in Africa, some countries in Asia, there's no minimum support price. Prices drop, farmers reduce production, prices rise again, farmers come back. So what does India gain by intervening in markets, supporting prices, encouraging production in years when there's already a surplus?
I remember that way back in, we goes to 60s and 70s, the Cotton Corporation of India was incorporated in the year 1970 with the purpose to work as a canalizing agency for importing cotton, because after partition, India was a cotton deficit country. But till the early 80s, the purpose could not be solved. So Government of India, along with the mandate to import cotton for the mills, there was a program, MSP program, launched by Government of India in 1982. And with this program of MSP, over a period of 20 years, India became self-reliant in terms of cotton production, and until 2002-3, like China, India was a cotton deficit country. So the point is, yes, it is true that as per WTO norms, the direct subsidy or subsidy to any crop or thing should be minimized or may not be least one. But whatever I find is one form or other, maybe direct or indirect, most of the cotton producing countries, maybe Pakistan, maybe China or others, US even, the subsidy to farmers means help to farmers is evident. So though in India, since production in India is comparatively the larger one, when we look at the help to the farmers, it appears that we are paying more. Whereas, because of the scale of production, I think it is so. But in case, so it is, I think, a need of the time for India, in case we don't go with that. So there may be the chances that, because like sometimes China in 10, 11 or so, they gone for brisk buying. If there is a deficit in India, and India will also go brisk buying similarly, because we are the second largest consumer of cotton in the world. So avoid all those situations as per my perception. And it is true that in case we won't allow the subsidy, even then there may not be any shortfall in production. That may be. But we feel that considering the yield also, everybody knows that yield in India are too less, and the farmers don't get the proper price because of certain regions and demographical reasons, I can say. So, in all, considering all those cases, as per my perception, it is the need for India that to continue with the same system until there is a sufficient surplus of cotton.
So, continuity of supply, benefiting farmers. Just like Scott said, other countries do it. So India does too.
India has a little bit different than other countries, because as on date, consumption wise also we are second largest, and so in that way, volume of help etc. may not be that much, because I am just working out the total help by now, which we given as a subsidy to farmers in terms of MSP since inception is about $1,000 million. From I'm talking about since 1982.
$1 billion.
$1 billion.
$1 billion.
1 billion. In the other way, it is $1 billion. So I'm talking about in absolute terms, it is $1 billion. So, and that too, because the consumption wise, the quantity of Indian consumption, if we work it out, so it would be worked out per ton, maybe the minimum one.
Okay, that's an interesting calculation. I'll have to pursue that. I want to turn to our private sector, our panelist members. I'm going to start with Mr. Shaw. He joined the cotton business about 15 years ago, looks like, in 2001 as an agent. Joined Louis Dreyfus Commodities as a trader in 2009. Made his full file on the website. So, Mete, you're a trader. Could you describe, explain, again, everybody knows how the MSPs operate. Could you describe how the activities by the Cotton Corporation of India affect your business as a trader, and what an impact it has on the cotton sector in India?
I think when we talk about subsidies or about government interventions, I think one thing that I subscribe to is that that is something that you've got to live with. And the reason I say that is because it's not something that you can really help. It's not something that is really driven by an economic consideration. Like the way we go about things. It's driven by many different reasons. I mean, for example, China might have a requirement to appease a certain section of their people. India might have a completely different reason, and US might have a different reason. I think from a trader's perspective, it just adds one more factor that you've got to track. It's just one more factor that you've got to have an opinion on, and you know, it can lead to a lot more volatility. It can lead to a lot less volatility. I mean, these days, if you look at how things are, I mean, the way I see it is, it's like you know, it doesn't let the market go down to a level where you can really clear out the glut, because you have India at 60 cents, like we saw on the slide, willing to stand there and buy the surplus. You have US, which is the next level, further down at 52 or lower. And the market is not allowed to move up either on any shock, simply because the Chinese reserves there to sell into any rally. In fact, it's depressing the markets right now. So you know, that leads to low volatility right now, and you know, in those sort of circumstances, it provides that much of a less opportunity for you to trade. So from that perspective, you've got to think, I think, from what drives the market. I mean, it's either the governments or the specs, because you know, with the lack of fundamental story, you've got to think like the government or think like the specs who are driving the market.
Less volatility. I think most governments would assert that's a good thing. And supporting prices to farmers, again, that's objective. Should we conclude that these government interventions are beneficial?
No, they're not. Obviously, we know that, I mean, like Mr. Mishra said, they've already thrown $1 billion at this effort. I mean, we know that in China, we had an estimate internally which said that all commodities put together, I think China spent between 2005 and 2013, they spent like $80 billion just buying it, not even accounting for the carry and the interest and the storage cost in there, of half of which was to cotton, pretty much. So, and US government pays a lot of subsidies as well. So it is all coming out of our pockets. I mean, after all, it's all coming out of the taxpayers' pockets. So it's not good, certainly not good. But then what I'm already alluding to is that it is something that you've got to live with, because it's not an economic decision, it's a political decision, and you can't really influence it.
Okay, well, not sure about that, but we'll go on to Colin. So Colin Oz, after a brief stint in the city of London, I assume that means you were in finance and banking. Colin began his career in the cotton industry in 1995 with Cargill Cotton. And he has a very distinguished background in cotton. So, Colin, you're another trader, another perspective, perhaps. Again, and you've traded cotton and lived in many countries. Could you give us your perspective? How do government interventions that support prices, that benefit farmers, how do these affect our business?
Okay, thanks, Terry. I mean, the first thing I'd say that I don't think any of the panelists have mentioned is that there are obviously a number of reasons why there are agricultural subsidies, but I think one of them, particularly in developing countries, is that small-scale farmers don't have access to forward contracts, and so if they want to kind of plan what they're going to plant, any certainty, they require effectively their government to give them some sort of guarantee or indication, and obviously that's what the MSP does in India. That's what a lot of the West African countries do when they have the state marketing boards, where they announce early in the season what the buying price is going to be. And I think that's a very important aspect for developing countries. Now, you can certainly argue that it's kind of run out of control in certain areas. For instance, the China target price is 19,800 RMB, which is obviously significantly above the current market. But then if we just look at a snapshot of where we are today, production is 8 million bales below consumption. So I don't think we can necessarily say that this sort of proliferation of support and subsidy programs is actually creating a supply. And as Mitesh rightly said, we're certainly wrestling with the legacy of China's activity over the past 4 or 5 years. But if we look at where we are now and look forward, I wouldn't actually say that the subsidies that are in place are particularly disruptive to the balance sheet. A few other points that I would stress is that as a trader, and Mitesh also touched on this, is that when we look at various subsidy programs around the world, we do have to try and project how that's going to influence supply, how it's going to influence demand, price. And the difficulty there is in cases where governments make knee-jerk reactions, because obviously we can't kind of foresee or accommodate in our thinking an unforeseen reaction. In the case of particularly the Indian MSP and the activity with CCI, as a trader, it's actually relatively easy to incorporate that into your analysis because it's very clear what their intentions are. It's very clear what price they will pay. It's clear how the policy works. And so I would certainly recommend from the private sector, speaking to any government officials and bureaucrats, is that having a pretty far line of sight as to how the subsidy program works is a key thing to make our life easier. And actually, going back to your point, Terry, about how volatility is probably a bad thing from the government's perspective, sometimes they don't overstate it. We often see articles in news wires about one government suddenly thinking about increasing yarn duties or banning exports, banning imports. Those are the kind of things that actually are really tough for us as traders. And that's what I would certainly try and encourage state officials to avoid. Looking back at India again, and specifically to your question about how has the MSP or how has the Indian support program impacted our lives as a trader, I mean, in many ways it's been positive. I think that my company and I know several other international trading companies partnered very successfully with CCI in the marketing of the stocks that they procured last year. I think that was to our mutual benefit. If we look at an area where it had potentially a negative impact on our business, is that one of the consequences of the Indian MSP is that it probably reduces exports during the harvest. Because obviously any excess, rather than clearing in the export market, can be sold to CCI for quite a large resource. And then correspondingly, during the off-season, when the Indian mills were generally looking to import, there's no strong demand for import because they can access the stocks that CCI can carry for them. So it probably reduces, to some extent, world trade. And as an international trader, we would rather have more world trade than less. So that's certainly a potential disadvantage. But I would certainly say that that's at least offset by the domestic opportunities that our company has had with working with CCI. Then another example where subsidies have certainly been disruptive but have been positive to the trade is again in China. China's imports in 2012 were 5.5 million tons. In 2013, they were just under 4.5 million tons. Now, as an international trader, that was an absolute boon for us. I mean, that just ramped up our volumes, gave us lots more opportunities to trade. And the reason that we could do that is because the Chinese government was buying 80% of their entire crop, and the shortfall was being filled by imports. So, certainly, I would never say that it didn't disrupt the balance sheet of world trade, but was it disadvantageous to us as a private trader? In that case, it certainly was.
So, these government measures, if they're transparent, if they're in place and predictable, you can work with them. Let's go on to the final member of our panel, and by final, I don't mean least in any sense. Mr. Arun Sequence7 is here. He's managing director of DD Cotton. listed as a government trading house, in agri-commodities more than just cotton, and also spinning operations. I didn't realize that until talking to him this morning. So, Arun, could you, again, same question, government programs exist, how do they affect you in your business here?
See, I think as far as subsidies are concerned, I don't need to say anything more. Scott and Mr. Mishra has already mentioned the reasons of subsidy. There are government pressures, there are government compulsions which they have to follow. But I firmly, the government always tries to take, like, knee-jerk reaction whenever there's a reason to give subsidy. So, what happened to China? China went in for buying of cotton in 2010, 11, 12, and what is the situation now? What happened to US? US is also reducing the subsidy because it's economically not sustainable. So, do we think India can sustain the type of subsidies they are paying year on year, or if they have to pay year on year? So, I'm a firm believer that subsidy is not a model which any economy can build on. I will go one step further. Everybody's talked about impacts of subsidy on the businesses and all. I think it's more or less the same for manpower or for LD or for other merchants. How they have benefited and some are not benefited. Ginners have not benefited with CCI and merchants have benefited from CCI subsidy operations. I would take one step further and say that government should also concentrate how to reduce the subsidy and increase the productivity of the farm products. Like farmers today, they are, you are not able to improve their practices, the farming practices, and they are always dependent. Okay, if we don't get a good crop or we don't get a good price, government is there to pay us. Do we want this to continue for lifelong? Is it a sustainable model? It's not. I personally very strongly believe that we should work towards how to improve the yields of cotton. For example, in cotton, we till as way back as 2003-04, our total crop was about 16 million bales. And where are we today? We are nearly twice. We are nearly about 36, 37 million bales. So the acreage has also increased and the yields have also increased. So now with the same acreage, why don't we work towards with the farmers to increase the yields of the cotton?
Really, price support operations of CCI, research, development, extension are not mutually exclusive. You do both. So, and as Mr. Mishra has pointed out, cumulative CCI expenditures over 40 years have been $1 billion. I haven't done the arithmetic, but you divide by kilograms and it gets out to a pretty small expenditure per kilogram. So what's the problem?
Well, it's $1 million because the MSP operations they have done is hardly about for 2 years in large operations. Now, if they are going to do year-on-year operations of MSP,
that's cumulative back to 1970.
It's going to be a huge number. It's not going to be 1 million. It will be $6, $7, $8, $10 million. So,
okay, I'm surveying the room here, and anybody who wants to ask a question is welcome to do so. Until I see some hands, I'm going to keep asking questions. If anybody has questions, please raise your hand. There's this issue of cost versus benefit. If a government decides that spending, whether it's $1 billion or $2 billion or $80 billion, like China, they decide it is worth the social benefits that they achieve, why can't they do it? What is the problem? So respond to that, and then Garen will ask a question. If the government can afford it, why?
Well, I think you will see. I'm not against the subsidy. I'm saying subsidy has to be there. You have to support the farmers. And the subsidy will continue year on year. But in order to increase the productivity of the country, don't you think the government should take some steps also to increase or move in that direction rather than only keep on paying subsidies? This is what my question is, and this is what my, this is what I look forward in years to come. The government should look at that angle.
Okay. Yes, so far as productivity is concerned, government should take a call. it is obvious that India is a country which has a maximum acreage in cotton. In case it produces more, then not only acreage will come down, production will also improve, and expenditure on account of cotton will reduce all across the globe. But the basic reason for that low yield is the demographic one, because in India, 1/3 crop area is rented. Rest 1/3 is irrigated and 2/3 is rented. So, since scanty lands only can produce cotton even, the poor farmers where there is no rain, leaving cotton land barren, farmers don't want to. So that's why they used to grow cotton. And in case you go with the productivity in the state of Gujarat, I think it is comparative with any other, few of other countries. Though it is not the encouraging one and not the highest one, but yes, it can be. In North also, in Tamil Nadu also, in Karnataka also. The yield has improved over a decade materially and substantially. So this is one part. I agree with you that yield should, government should take a part. Another half of the question that MSP. In my opinion, MSP in India, I again reiterate that total expenditure since inception on account of MSP is $1 billion. In terms of rupees, it is 60,000 crores rupees. It is no way comparable with China or so, because we used to incur loss on market-driven conditions. And in my opinion, both the players should be provided level playing field equally. On the one hand, the poor farmers who doesn't have any financial ability has to sell cotton in the peak season like November and December. On the other, the trading houses which has multiple types of the financial ability and financial muscles, they both cannot, in my opinion, be at the same level playing fields. So that is the time when prices remains at the lowest to avoid distress sale by the farmers. You can imagine the situation when a country like India, if there will not be any MSP or so, and in the month of December or January when arrivals remains at peak, if any decision in the yard side will happen, then who is going to buy cotton? The prices will come to that level which next year the farmers, as per Bangladesh, even the trade has to suffer. So the point is, farmers who have very poor state of financial health, if they would be the farmers of the same financial health and capacity like the states or so, because you may all be knowing that here in India, farmers are selling seed cotton. Whereas in other countries, the farmers are getting cotton seed at their own, then they are selling. So, in my opinion, it cannot be made comparable. And on the other hand, the traders and the industry, which has I think more than 100 times financial ability and muscle than the farmer, cannot be made at the same level. So, with this motive as per my perception, Government of India again to help the farmer and to save the cotton, as well as it is market driven. When market price goes below MSP, I can say, or the below cost, technically it is the cost. If it is below cost, then whosoever, if I am the seller, can I survive offering the price less than cost? No, I can't survive. So why one should be given that condition when they should have to sell their produce at a lesser than the cost? This is the concept. Thank you.
Okay, Darren. So the issue of support to the farmers has been addressed. But what stops the consuming industry to then come up and say that the farmer is being supported, the farmer is being protected? Why shouldn't we be supported and why shouldn't we be protected? So if that keeps on happening, what is going to be the consequences? So I want to specifically ask Mitesh Shah and Karan. I want to specifically, and I'll repeat what I just said. When the farmer is supported, the consuming industry can come and say that we also want to be protected, we also want to be supported. Where does this stop? Okay, that's part one. In part two, specifically addressed to Colin Hines and Mitesh Shah. You spoke about how
benefited as building houses in certain situations. Why don't you all go back to 2010-11 and tell us when government intervenes what really happens? And I'm sure you've seen the negative side of this intervention. Slight deviation from subsidies, but a topic that needs to be addressed.
I think as far as the first part is concerned, I guess Mr. Mishra has addressed it. I mean, it is not a, I mean, like he's saying, it's not really a level playing field when we talk about India specifically, where, you know, the farmer is really marginal, small, and, you know, in need of support. Whether the same is true of textile mills or no, or the other sectors in the value chain or no, is something that the government has to consider, and I really don't think that it is necessarily at the same level playing field.
But what is stopping them? They will do this.
No, they will.
What are they going to do?
No, people will certainly ask for support.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then how does the government answer? So if one side, a certain section is being supported and protected, why the other section is going to say that we need the same thing, and who's going to stop it? And what will the government as a father figure do in this?
Yeah, I think it's a government decision. It's pretty as simple as that. I mean, it's a decision that the government wants to take, and it's more of a political decision, like I said in the opening. As far as the second part is concerned, I completely agree. In fact, there is a positive and a negative side to things, but I do also agree with what Colin said, where you have more of a clarity and transparency in government policy and how it is going to function. It does make life simpler for the whole value chain, including the mills, not only the traders or the ginners, but also the mills. So when you have more clarity, more transparency in how things are going to function, it does make things simpler. So in 2010, certainly things really went out of hand, but that is the reality of things. I mean, that's how the world is.
Well, in your turn, the government subsidizes farmers. I don't they subsidize ginners, merchants, and spinners, and weavers, all the way up the line to consumers. Where does it stop and why?
Sure, I think it's actually the nail on the head. It's ultimately a political decision, you know, and in a democracy, the elected officials are going to apportion their largesse according to where they think they'll get the most votes. I mean, Scott mentioned that one of the reasons why there's a subsidy program in the US is because farmers have a strong lobby. One of the reasons that farmers have a strong lobby is because of the structure of the Senate in the US. There are 2 senators for every state, which means that a senator in Wyoming represents about half a million people. A senator in California represents, is it 20 million, something like that? Maybe even more. So generally the agricultural states have got a very low population, but one senator has 1 vote in the Senate. So you can clearly see, because of the structure of that, that the interests of less populated states in the United States are going to have a disproportionate kind of lobby power or voting power. And so, I mean, I think that in the case of why are there agricultural subsidies, again, it's a function of the political structure, and I guess that's probably very much true in India as well, where it's largely an economic economy, and so there's going to be a very favourable light cast upon agricultural industry, because so many hundreds of millions of people are employed in that industry. I would imagine that somewhere like Pakistan, where the textile industry is a massive employer, their lobby is probably disproportionately strong versus let's say the textile industry in the US. The textile industry in the US employs very few people now, so I'm sure they're kind of counting their votes up is probably not that important to the politicians. It's a very cynical answer, but I think that's largely what it comes down to. It is political. Okay, so I mean, trying to cast my mind back, giving me six-year quizzes on Indian policy. I think it was, I'm going to say April 2010. Was it when the? Yeah. Well, I tell you what, if Manik, Ritesh, and Dhiraj.
So, okay, 2010 was the first one, but the main one was December 2000.
Okay, I'll avoid getting bogged down in the weeds on this. I mean, just generally, yeah. I mean, when there was an unexpected export ban, followed by the new rules to apply for the export license, where clearly the amount of licenses available were massively short of the demand for Indian exports. I mean, it had a huge impact on the market. The world market obviously rallied because there was no Indian supply. Indian prices softened, and another unintended consequence of it was that there were quite a lot of defaults that year. But at the time I was actually working for a different company, but my current company and my previous company both suffered significantly, as much from price movements, but more from defaults. And I mean, I guess it's a philosophical question, is that if there is an obstacle to exports, is that a genuine default, or is that just an act of God? But anyway, that was certainly a period of time which was generally very negative, certainly for the two companies that I've been involved in.
Still, again, very negative for the industry. Demand destruction. Arun brought up the issue of yields. The highest national yield in the world is Australia, 2,500 kilograms of lint per hectare. Part of the reason is that there are no subsidies. Farmers are efficient to survive. Farmers who are not efficient go out of business. They find some other job to do. Now, policies that protect least efficient farmers during periods of price downturn can really help the industry in the long run. Scott, you haven't spoken for a while. I know you're
chomping at the bit.
You're not a political advocate, but you've been working in agriculture for 30 years. So this issue of productivity, there is a relationship between policies and subsidized production and long-run productivity. So is it really doing anybody a favor to subsidize production?
My gut answer and reaction is no. It doesn't help productivity or efficiency. And I think the title that you chose for this session suggests or certainly implies that government interventions are inefficient in the operation of a market. Before I explain in a little bit more detail, let me just say one thing. We've been talking about subsidies, and several people, all of us have mentioned the intent to support farmers. The one voice that's missing on this panel is a farmer. And I often find that to be the case. Everybody's talking about the interests of a group of people who seldom have a voice in the process. When I started in USDA, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture ran subsidy programs that, in some sense, were not unlike what India has now. Guaranteed prices, government procurement, government sales, government storage of a number of commodities. It became politically and economically unsustainable. I think people realized the damage it was causing to the farm sector, to trade to markets. But in some sense, they were defensive measures. And you said that U.S. programs were often done because other people did that. I think partly that's true, but a lot of the reasons for, I think, our programs back then and up until now were largely internal to the United States. But we learned over the years and moved away from those programs. In the mid-90s, the Freedom to Farm Act came in, and the title, I think, is indicative of what the policymakers' intent was: freedom to farm. Release farmers from the shackles that are put on them by government programs. I haven't spent a lot of time with Indian farmers, but when I do, sometimes the support programs are invisible to them, actually, but they feel they have no choice but to produce those commodities for which they need some kind of support. I think there are enough examples around the world now, whether it's China, United States in the late 80s and 90s, the European Union, others, who have gone through a phase of reducing or eliminating the most distorting subsidies that they have in place to something approaching a free market. The Australian example in cotton, New Zealand, good examples. The US and EU have dramatically lowered the support programs overall. And I've been in India now 1 year, but in the conversations I've had, and me talking to leading policy people in the government, I think there's a growing recognition here as well that the support programs, and I'm not talking just about MSP, but a lot of the input subsidies that are provided to farmers here are creating a misallocation of resources that is very detrimental to India. Never mind the market distortion and trade distortions. When you have wheat and rice supported in 5 North India states at levels that really are beyond what the market or economic conditions would dictate, you're seeing production of commodities and products in places where perhaps the farmer should be growing something else. India seems to have insatiable demand for pulses. Why aren't people growing pulses? It's a rain-fed crop. Pulse production is limited to rain-fed areas. Anytime irrigation is introduced, a pulse farmer will produce wheat and rice. And why? Input subsidies and government support. Yesterday, there was a great chart, I think, from Olam on the water deficits in the regions that are receiving the most subsidies for products like wheat and rice. We talked about India rice exports to West Africa. India is, I think, going to export maybe 11 or 12 million tons of rice. How much water is in that rice? Why is India subsidizing the export of precious water that could be used here for something else? For me, as an economist, and looking at countries that I've worked in around the world, these are the kind of distortions and misallocation of resources that, to me, are very detrimental to a country's own well-being and the viability of its agricultural sector. So that's why we talk about our experience and the mistakes that were made in the United States when we had our support programs as an example. Follow a pathway that will free your farmers to respond to consumer demand and market conditions. So unshackle them from these government restraints.
Yeah, just one last comment. I think Mr. Scott rightly said about, if you look at cotton.
Excuse me, the acoustics are causing us a problem. Appreciate you. Come up here. If you could,
yeah,
excuse me, if you could actually stand here in front of us so we can hear your voice.
It's like a real echo.
I was just saying that if you look at India, where cotton acreage has been steadily increasing, whereas you look at the world, US and China, even with that massive support program, the cotton acreage kept on declining. Which begs the question that is India doing a lot more than is needed for the cotton farmers, whereas the other farmers, mainly like soybeans or others, are being neglected? Because like Arunji rightly said, that the main thing is that productivity needs to increase, not just in cotton, but in other commodities, in maybe soybeans, where the yields are far poorer than world averages. And if you make other crops more competitive, then India will not need to grow that much more cotton than it is doing now, and which is what the world economics are saying. And And my second question is actually for Mr. Mishra, that we have seen United States do away with some of the subsidies that they have. China has reduced subsidies, introduced a direct subsidy program. So in India, I don't remember seeing a precedent whether the support prices have been reduced, but if economic sense does indicate that the support prices need to be reduced for cotton and maybe some other commodities, do we think government will take that step in future and reduce the MSP for cotton or maybe some other commodity if it is equally more remunerative to the farmer, but it's not economically sustainable? So we have only seen the MSP prices going up year on year, but never have seen it come down. But other economies are doing it. Other countries have reduced the support prices. In India, can we expect such a thing in future by the government?
So with regards to the first question about acreage, yes, I think up to 13-14, acreage as well as quantum of production in India of cotton has been increasing, but you may observe that trend has for last 3 years is declining in India too. Last year we produced 380 lakh bales, earlier 398 lakh bales. This year we are expecting 352 lakh bales, even if this all MSP etc. So the trend in India is also declining instead of increasing. Now coming to the second question, MSP, though program is there, but you may observe that last 3 years the amount of MSP which has been increased is a notional one. Only 50 rupees per quintal in terms of cents, I think it may be less than 1 cent. Whereas inflation and other things have increased competitively with a bigger base. So yes, program is there. Ideally, I agree with Mr. Singla that subsidy to cotton and to any other crop should not be there. But there are the conditions because of which in India, particularly why? Because we are basically out of our total cotton production, 80% is consumed domestically, whereas except China, in the rest of the country it is not like that. We are consuming our cotton ourselves maximum quantity. Does it there in any other case, any other country or so, except China? No. And if you compare with the subsidy amount, we can sit together and check it out. I think the subsidy which India government is being providing, if we calculate as we initially told per ton, it will be the minimum one. Direct subsidy I am talking about in terms of MSP. Other crops, I don't have the figure about rice also because it is not my field. So in that way, it is declining also, and subsidy amount, I remember last 3 years, only 50 rupees it has increased. It is nominal only. It is almost same. It is not increasing in bigger way. And you may recall that in last 5-6 years, it was 8-9 when massive MSP operations have been made, barring this last 14-15, and this time 14-15. Because 8-9 I still remember, the MSP was because there is a 40% increase in minimum support price in price. Whereas in 14-15, it was not because of increase in MSP, means minimum support price. It was just 50 rupees. It is because of unusual conditions, as China did not import cotton. The situation is altogether different. If global forces will not play like that, then I still hope that in India the trade will be regulated with the current mechanisms which are going on. So that was the unusual situation. And you also agree with me, last 2-3 years, the quantum of export, when we produced 440 million bales of 12 million acres, and now the acreage has come down in even that, and our production is 35 million only. I think the figures will sufficient. Thank you.
One of the issues that was raised earlier is one of continuity of supply. In the intervenes, markets with the MSPs, the prices are low to make sure that their farmers stay in business the following year, so that they're still there producing cotton. In a world where cotton flows back and forth freely with 40-foot containers without difficulty. Why is continuity of supply, domestic supply, important anymore? Arun, you are a spinner. You actually buy cotton. I'm sorry, not you. Okay. All right, well, you're in the cotton market. Okay, so I'll turn this to you and then to Mr. Mishra again. Again, this whole issue of supporting cotton farmers in times of low price. Remember, the MSPs are only effective when prices are low. By definition, that means there's a surplus. And why, how does it help the economy of India, the cotton value chain, to keep farmers producing cotton at a time when it's already in surplus?
See, the question is not about farmers should grow more cotton or less cotton. The thing is, what India needs in terms of cotton is not an agro, it's not a consumer item, it's more like a industrial item, industrial use. And as far as India is concerned, we need to know what is the requirement of cotton for consumption in India. As one of the questions asked by Sumit was, do we need to grow more cotton than what we consume? Just like this about the rice issue, that why are we exporting rice when it is consuming so much of water? Subsidy, your question, subsidy, yes, we should support the farmers whenever it is required, whether it is by way of subsidy, whether in terms of MSP operations, in terms of fertilizer subsidy, in terms of seed subsidy, that's always there. But I think the government should also take a note that the subsidy has to be controlled at what level. Can we just keep on giving subsidy blindly year on year without any basis of subsidy, or should we control? Because like the question also raised was, what about pulses? Why India is not growing pulses? That's required for consumption. So we have to concentrate on products, and we have to divide that, okay fine, these products in agri commodities will have more subsidy if you grow more, these products will have less subsidy. And for Mishra ji, I think one question is there, you are giving subsidy in cotton across the table to all farmers. And you said that there are some farmers, 2/3 of the country is under rainwater irrigation and 1/3 is under irrigated water. So why can't you give more subsidy to farmers who are not having irrigated water? So that all these problems what we are facing of disparity between different states can also go down, and you can ask the farmers to grow more cotton.
My reply is yes, I agree. As I told, that the government has been contemplating so many things to reduce the quantum of subsidy, particularly in case of cotton. Because I personally also feel when there is surplus of cotton within the country, why should we? But since policymakers are doing so, and as I again say that yes, though it is a program, but you may observe that last 2-3 years, amount of subsidy per quintal is almost same. It has not been increased, though it should reduce ideally. And yes, pulses, wherever we are in deficit, we should promote. And wherever we are surplus, we should.
Because even in your operations, you know which is the maximum MSU operation state, that is in Andhra Pradesh.
Obviously, yes.
In Punjab, you hardly have any MSU operations. In Gujarat, it is very limited because they have water available. Similarly, I think there should be a tapering point that year on year the subsidy should go down rather than go up. And at the same time, you should also try to give benefit of subsidy to farmers which are not able to get water, which is very important for their products.
In that way, it is going there only because Andhra and states where irrigation facilities are not there, where the yield is too less, it is going only in those states, particularly Andhra Pradesh and this Telangana. And north states, the price always remain high. In this last 2-3 years, I tell you, in northern states did not get any subsidy because there the prices always remain higher than market price. Gujarat, least one, a particular quantum of subsidy was paid to Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, where the yield is less because of the irrigation and other facilities.
Point out that this discussion is demonstrating my concerns about subsidies and rent-seeking behavior. As soon as you have subsidies of any kind, no matter how efficient, how well-intended, people squabble. Give me more, give them more, administer it this way. And there's no end to the amount of discussion here. So Scott has something to say, and Darren has a question.
I just wanted to go back to the point that Terry made as part of asking that question. What is the point of subsidies in situations like this when the global market can deliver product so efficiently? I know that a lot of countries equate food security with self-sufficiency. Food security is actually the ability to access whatever you need, however, whether you produce it yourself or whether you get it from the global market. And in an environment where the global market is providing so many agricultural and food products, and India participates in that, why subsidize to that extent when the global market can provide much of the needs, either as a marketplace for your goods or as a supplier of things that you need?
Again, I say that because the process is not in India, ideally, I reiterate that there should not be any subsidy. But as India, which has a 1.2 billion population, and farmers are not having means, so that should also be given the same. The status, financial status is unlike the status of any other farmer of any country. So this, I think, make our government, means politically or otherwise, economically, I am very much like with you that there should not be. But because of certain reasons, it is going on. The process of this government is on decision making. It should be reduced. It should be minimized to the extent possible. Ideally, to make it negligible. That is there. Clear?
So, I really want to tell you that each panelist, each panelist gives his view on the proposal to implement a direct transfer of subsidy by the Indian government. Instead of a conventional MSP operator, people have been asking the government to move to a direct transfer of subsidy. Can each panelist give the view on that?
Scott, do you know what that is?
Yes.
Okay. Start with you.
Rather than, for example, on the public distribution scheme, consumers in India have access to actual physical commodity, wheat, rice, at highly subsidized prices. And one of the direct transfers or benefit transfers would be just give the consumers the cash, put it right into their bank account, let them go to the market, buy what they want. On the producer side, there's a similar interest in providing farmers a direct transfer of benefits. I think these would be, very positive steps that would eliminate a lot of the blockages that currently exist in the market. Transmit the right price signals from the market to farmers so that they can respond to actual market conditions, and I think direct resources more appropriately. Obviously, given the status quo in India, the situation right now, that can't happen overnight. It's going to have to take some time to implement a process like that. It would also, I think, address a lot of the rent seeking that takes place when you have support or subsidy programs, and would go a long way. When I worked in China, they started doing this with farmers. They took away their seed subsidy, they had a subsidy to buy animals, all that kind of stuff. They just gave the farmers cash. And when we talk about it with Indian policymakers here, they say, but we don't know that the farmers then will actually buy seeds or buy the inputs. And the Chinese said, we don't care. Let them buy what they want. Farmers ended up paying for their children's education. They bought clothes, they did other things. But that was their choice. And it ended up rationalizing markets in rural areas in a very positive way. So I think it would be a great step, but different.
See, I think the payment of subsidy through direct payment method is what we're looking for, and that has to happen. And I think our government has also taken some baby steps in this direction. Like CCI has started making payment online directly to the account of farmers. And they are buying seed cotton also directly. So as Scott said, it's a process and it will take a long time. So if he thinks it's going to take a long time, if India is going to take a longer time. But I think the process has started and it should happen, and that will remove a lot of obstacles and a lot of problems which are being faced by farmers. So this is the step, this should be the right direction.
I think you have this, I mean, CCI already has conducted a pilot study in Maharashtra, which I guess can explain us their experience on that. And I think this government certainly is for more and more direct transfer of subsidies or benefits. It seems like that's the case. But I think there are a lot of challenges as well, and there are a lot of questions that this particular method would raise. Like for example, in India it is pretty complex. How would you really decide how much? I mean, if it was to be given on cotton, how much was the yield? I guess you could come up with a 50 million bale crop that you asked for within a year, because everybody would be growing cotton then to get that direct transfer. The other interesting part, I think, is where if you look at the economics of managing the subsidy from a government perspective. Today, I personally believe maybe outside of US, India is probably doing a pretty good job at managing the whole subsidy for cotton, because all they need to do is take off the exportable surplus during that November through March period, which is what CCI does. Maybe lose some money on marketing it, maybe even get lucky marketing it at a better price and make money. But in case of a direct transfer, you are faced with the question as to how are you going to, or whether you have to include the whole farming community. Here you are pretty much only handling 1/3 of the crop. In the direct transfer case, you will have to pretty much give it to all the cotton farmers in the country. So that would actually raise a bigger bill on the government. So I mean, there are a lot of questions that you've got to answer before you can get down to really operational stuff.
Well, I have a you agree to be efficient, but you're worried that make it easy for everybody to apply for benefits.
So I personally feel that in long run, the concept of subsidy should not be there. But because of certain reasons it is there. And so far as direct subsidy is concerned, it may not be direct also, but since at present subsidy is being given in the form of MSP and government is contemplating for switching over to any other system of direct payment of subsidy to farmers. Yes, there was a pilot study supposed to be done by, it was thought that it should be given to any arm of a particular state. Maharashtra was chosen at that time, but it is still in embryonic stage. So let us see that in next year or so if it happens, because once we give the issue to particular state, then they also seek their approval of cabinet also. So finally, I can only say yes. In long run, it should not be the only thing, and all the trades should be dependent one and independent one. And but as there are some issues with the country-to-country differs, and economically and otherwise, that's why it is happening. And in case all the stakeholders of the trade will remain at the same platform, then it should not be there.